Before we begin, please tell us what city you're from in the comments, subscribe, like, and watch until the end. Here we go. A fierce gust of wind threw stinging snow into Gregory's face, forcing him to squint. When he opened his eyes again, they were everywhere. Greenish-yellow lights flickered and died in the darkness, surrounding him on all sides. Wolves, a whole pack. The fire had almost burned out, and Dawn felt a lifetime away. His swollen knee throbbed with pain. With every passing minute, the biting cold seeped deeper under his clothes, draining his last strength. He was only 19, and he knew deep down that he was likely facing his final night. It was December of '42. So much snow had fallen that the roofs of the remote cabins were barely visible beneath their white caps. The cold was brutal. Birds froze in mid-flight. That year, Gregory turned 19, but his youth had ended long ago. His father had been taken away in '38 after a neighbor's false accusation. His mother, Mrs. Barbara, struggled to keep their homestead going. His younger brother Andrew and his two sisters hadn't survived the harsh winter of '40. Only two of them remained, Gregory and his mother. Then came the war. Gregory was lucky. He wasn't drafted due to an old lung injury. He'd been severely ill as a child, and it had left its mark. The recruitment officer had simply waved him off. With lungs like those, you'd only be fit for service in heaven. No one in the community sat idle. The war effort needed provisions, but they lived on the brink of starvation. That's why Gregory decided to head to the remote trapping cabins that winter where his grandfather Timothy used to hunt. He hoped to get some meat, maybe even some pelts, to trade for flour and kerosene. "Gregory, don't go," his mother pleaded as he packed his father's old rucksack. "I have a bad feeling. Venga is pregnant, and going alone is a bad omen." Venga, a husky Gregory had inherited from his father, was indeed close to giving birth. She was heavy, with swollen teats, and had been digging a den under the porch for her future litter. "Mom, come on." He waved her off, tightening the straps of his pack. 2 weeks, there and back. I'll be home by Christmas with a catch. Imagine what a feast we'll have." Truth be told, Gregory himself was uneasy. Venga always went hunting with him. Her nose was excellent. But he couldn't take a pregnant dog on such a long journey. He left before dawn, aiming to reach his grandfather's cabin in Bear Creek Hollow by nightfall. His mother made the sign of the cross over him at the threshold, slipping a small pouch of salt into his pocket, a local custom for protection against evil spirits. The day had dawned surprisingly clear. The sun, rising above the forest canopy, made the snow sparkle so brightly it hurt his eyes. Gregory walked quickly, sinking rhythmically into the snow that crunched under his old leather boots. His father's shotgun pulled comfortably at his shoulder. His spirits were light. He had, after all, escaped the village. Lately, it had been hard there. Casualty notices arrived almost every week. Women wept by the fences. Children walked silently. In the forest, however, it was quiet and peaceful. Only the occasional crackle of trees from the frost and the creak of snow underfoot. By midday, the sky had clouded over with heavy gray clouds and snow began to fall. Gregory didn't give it much thought. The cabin was not far now. He followed a familiar trail, one he had walked many times with his father. But then the unexpected happened. The trail wound along the edge of a small ravine. The snow fell harder, and visibility dropped to just a few feet. He slipped on a patch of ice dusted with snow and, losing his balance, tumbled down the slope. The fall was short but harsh. Gregory landed on his right leg, and something loudly crunched in his knee. "Ah, damn it!" he cried out from the sharp pain. He tried to stand, but immediately collapsed back into the snow. His knee swelled instantly and refused to bear his weight. Gregory looked around. The ravine's slope was steep and snow-covered. Climbing back up with an injured leg seemed impossible. "Don't panic, Greg," he told himself. "Catch your breath, then figure out what to do." He pulled his water flask from his pack and took a swig. For a moment he felt better. He examined his leg. His knee was swollen and bruised, but the bone seemed intact. Tearing a strip from his shirt, he fashioned a tight bandage. Then, using a branch from a nearby tree as a lever, he slowly began to haul himself up the slope. Every step was a struggle. Sweat poured down his back despite the cold, and the ascent took almost an hour. When he finally reached the top, the sky had darkened considerably. The snow was falling in a thick curtain, and the wind had intensified, turning the snow flurry into a full-blown blizzard. Gregory knew he wouldn't make it to the cabin now. He needed to find shelter and build a fire before it got completely dark. With his last reserves of strength, he fashioned a makeshift crutch and hobbled toward the nearest thick fir trees, where the snow was less deep. He found a fallen tree, cleared a space under it, and pulled a small camping axe from his pack. Gathering firewood with an injured leg was tough, but there was no choice, either a fire or death from the cold. Finally, the flames caught, and Gregory sank down beside it with a sigh of relief, stretching out his aching leg. The blizzard howled like an enraged beast. In such weather, even the forest creatures stayed hidden in their dens and burrows. He threw more branches onto the fire and involuntarily recalled his mother's words. "Don't go alone. It's a bad omen." Night fell swiftly, as if someone had abruptly draped a black blanket over the forest. The fire cast eerie shadows on the snow, and the wind moaned through the treetops. Gregory decided he had to hold out until morning, and then worry about reaching the cabin or returning to the village. Fatigue, the pain in his knee, and the warmth from the fire took their toll. He began to nod off. He tried to fight the drowsiness, but his eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Gregory didn't know how long he slept, but he woke with a jolt. Something had changed. The blizzard had died down, and an odd, piercing silence had settled over the forest. The fire was almost out, and he urgently needed to tend to it. He reached for the branches lying nearby, and suddenly froze. In the darkness, at the very edge of the dim glow from the embers, two greenish-yellow lights flickered. They vanished and reappeared, a little closer this time. Gregory slowly reached for his shotgun, which lay beside him. His hands trembled. Gradually, his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he saw them. Wolves, an entire pack. They surrounded his camp in a semicircle, slowly closing the distance. In the light of the dying fire, he could make out their gray shadows flitting between the trees. A strong gust of wind threw stinging snow into Gregory's face, forcing him to squint. When he opened his eyes again, they were everywhere. Greenish-yellow lights flickered and died in the darkness, surrounding him on all sides. Wolves, a whole pack. The fire had almost burned out, and dawn felt a lifetime away. His swollen knee throbbed with pain. With every passing minute, the biting cold seeped deeper under his clothes, draining his last strength. He was only 19, and he knew deep down that he was likely facing his final night. "So, you're just going to sit there in the middle of a blizzard?" a voice suddenly echoed. Gregory flinched and spun around, but there was no one there. Only the wolves' eyes glowed in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance a faint jingle of bells could barely be heard. His heart pounded wildly in his chest. He quickly tossed the last branches onto the fire and, grabbing his shotgun, aimed at the nearest wolf. The shot ripped through the silence of the night forest. The predator yelped and sprang back, but the rest of the pack only retreated for a moment before beginning to close the circle again. Gregory had only one cartridge left. The others were in his backpack, which lay by the fire. To reach it, he would have to take several steps, but his injured leg was failing him. At that moment, a drawn-out howl echoed from the forest. First one, then others joined in. This sound was not like an ordinary wolf howl. There was something eerie, otherworldly about it, as if ghostly beings, not beasts, were wailing. One of the wolves, apparently the alpha, huge with silvery gray streaks on its ruff, stepped into the firelit space. It stood motionless, staring at Gregory with unblinking yellow eyes. In those eyes the young man saw not only hunger, but also a strange sense of understanding, almost human. "Lord, help me," Gregory whispered, realizing that without divine intervention he wouldn't survive. In despair, he grabbed a burning brand from the fire and waved it, trying to scare off the predators. The wolves retreated, but only for a moment. Soon they began to approach again, no longer fearing the fire. His knee throbbed with pain, and his mouth was dry from fear. The young man knew he couldn't last much longer. The fire was dying, and there were no more branches to throw on it. And then he remembered that tree under which he was sitting, a fir with low-hanging branches. If he could climb up it, he would be safe from the wolves, at least until morning. The question was, would his injured leg hold up? Without further hesitation, Gregory sharply turned and, overcoming the pain, grabbed the lowest branch. Adrenaline gave him strength, and with surprising ease he pulled himself up onto the first bough. The wolves, understanding his maneuver, snarled and lunged at the tree, but it was too late. He was already climbing higher. His heart pounded wildly and his hands trembled from the strain. Sharp pain shot through his knee with every movement, but fear was stronger. Gregory climbed higher and higher until he reached a spot where the trunk was still thick enough to support his weight, but safely far from the ground. Below, by the extinguished fire, the wolves circled. Their howls tore through the night silence, making him jump. He tightly embraced the tree trunk, realizing that the main threat now wasn't the wolves, but the cold. The frost grew stronger every hour, and he had nothing to shelter him. Time stretched on, unbearably slow. His hands and feet gradually went numb from the cold. Gregory felt himself freezing, to keep from falling asleep, and he knew that sleep in such cold meant death. He began to recall every prayer his mother had ever taught him. "Our Father, who art in heaven," he whispered with blue lips, trying not to let his teeth chatter. The night seemed never-ending. The wolves would vanish into the forest darkness, then reappear as if checking if he had fallen yet. And with every passing minute, Gregory felt his strength draining away. His hands, gripping the tree trunk, grew stiff, his fingers no longer obeying him. Somewhere in the distance, a strange ringing sound was heard, like bells, though how could there be bells in the middle of the winter wilderness? Hallucinations from the cold and exhaustion, he thought, trying to press himself harder against the tree trunk to retain what little warmth he had left. The ringing grew clearer, and a dull thud joined it, rhythmic, like drum beats. Gregory lifted his heavy head, trying to understand where the sound was coming from. And then he saw him. Into the clearing, directly towards his tree, a person emerged. Short, wrapped in strange clothing of fur and leather, with a hood concealing his face. In his hand he held something resembling a small drum, and the soft taps on it produced that very ringing sound. The wolves, to Gregory's astonishment, did not lunge at the man. On the contrary, they retreated, disappearing into the darkness of the forest as if frightened by the unexpected guest. "Are you still alive up there?" the stranger asked, craning his neck. The voice was strange, neither old nor young, deep, with an unusual accent that Gregory couldn't place. Alive," he managed to stammer, feeling his lips barely move from the cold. "Then come down. What are you perched up there for, like a squirrel?" Gregory wanted to explain that he couldn't. His hands wouldn't cooperate. His leg ached, and the wolves might return. But the words wouldn't come. The strange man shook his head, as if reading his thoughts. "Don't be afraid. The wolves are gone. They know me." Indeed, the predators were nowhere to be seen. The young man cautiously started to descend, clutching at branches with his unresponsive fingers. In the final stretch, his strength gave out, his hands loosened their grip, and he tumbled into the snow. The impact was hard. Gregory hit his head on something solid and lost consciousness. He came to the smell of smoke and herbs. He opened his eyes and didn't immediately understand where he was. Above him was a ceiling of logs darkened with age, and he lay on a wooden bunk, covered by a fur blanket. A small stove crackled with fire, and the air was filled with the aroma of unfamiliar herbs. "Awake at last," the same voice with the unusual accent said. Gregory turned his head and saw the man sitting by the stove. Now in the light he could see him better. He was an old man, short but sturdy, with a wrinkled dark face and long gray hair braided into plaits. He was strangely dressed, in ancient-looking clothes of leather and fur, embroidered with beads and adorned with metal pendants that tinkled softly with his every movement. "Where am I?" Gregory asked, trying to sit up. But a sharp pain in his head forced him back down. "Lie still, don't fidget," the old man said. "You're in the hunting cabin, the very one you are headed to." The young man looked around in surprise. Indeed, it was his grandfather's cabin in Bear Creek Hollow. But how did he get here? And who was this strange old man? "How did you find me?" Gregory asked, feeling his throat dry. The old man, as if reading his thoughts, offered him a birch bark cup of hot brew. "Drink. It will help." Gregory gratefully took the drink. The brew was bitter, but wonderfully aromatic. After drinking it, he felt a pleasant warmth spread through his body. "Did someone send you? Perhaps from the village?" He tried again to find out where his rescuer came from. The old man shook his head. "No one sent me. I came myself." He paused, throwing more wood into the stove. "You're a brave young man. Anyone else would have given up, but you held on." "What about my leg?" Gregory remembered his injury. "Your knee?" The old man chuckled. "It will heal. I've made poultices from forest herbs. 2-3 days, and you'll be as good as new." The young man looked doubtfully at his knee, wrapped in some leaves and tied with strips of birch bark. Strangely, the pain had indeed lessened. "Thank you," he began, but suddenly felt a strong wave of weakness and closed his eyes. The next few days passed in a haze. Gregory drifted in and out of a feverish sleep, briefly regaining consciousness. During these short periods of wakefulness, the old man gave him herbal brews and fed him some nourishing gruel. He spoke little, only occasionally humming a tune to himself in an unfamiliar language. On the fourth day, Gregory woke with a clear head. The weakness had receded, and even his leg hardly pained him. He sat up on the bunk and found the cabin empty. The old man was nowhere. With difficulty, he stood and walked to the window. Outside, the bright winter sun shone, dazzling his eyes with the reflection off the snow. The day was clear and frosty. Gregory opened the door and looked out, but there were no tracks around the cabin, only untouched snow, as if no one had entered or left. Closing the door, he went back inside and carefully surveyed the dwelling. It was indeed his grandfather's cabin. He recognized every detail, every crack in the walls. But something was off. On a shelf, Gregory noticed a small drum, the very one the old man had carried. He picked it up, running his fingers over the taut hide. The drum emitted a soft, melodic sound. At that very moment, the cabin door opened, and his rescuer appeared in the doorway. Now he was dressed even more strangely, in a long caftan, richly embroidered with intricate patterns, and adorned with many pendants and amulets. On his head was a fur cap, decorated with antlers. "You're really awake now," he said, entering the cabin. "Good. That means you'll be going home soon." "Who are you?" Gregory asked directly, still holding the drum. The old man looked at him with a slight smile. "My name would mean nothing to you. Just call me Old Many." "Old man?" Gregory repeated. Are you a shaman?" The old man laughed, and a chill ran down Gregory's spine at the sound. "Shaman, medicine man, warlock, call me what you wish. Those are all your English words. I simply know the language of the forest and its inhabitants." He walked over and took the drum from Gregory. "I need to tell you something important," he said, his voice becoming serious. "Sit down." Gregory sat down on the bunk, while the old man settled by the stove, holding the drum. He began to tap it softly with his fingers, and the sound, strangely enough, filled the entire cabin. "Once, many years ago," he began, continuing to tap the drum, "I was a young hunter from the Black Elk clan. Our people lived in these lands since time immemorial, long before the English settlers arrived. We knew every trail, every stream, every tree." He paused for a moment, as if lost in memories. "One winter, I was hunting far from my camp. There was a fierce blizzard, much like the one that caught you. I found a rogue bear's den. Such bears are very dangerous. They haven't hibernated for the winter and roam hungry and aggressive." The old man continued tapping the drum rhythmically, and Gregory began to feel that his words were not just in his ears, but directly in his mind. "We met on a narrow trail. I had only a knife and a spear. The bear attacked first. We fought." The old man instinctively rubbed his chest. "He left me a scar for life." He unbuttoned his caftan and showed Gregory his chest, crisscrossed with deep scars. Even after years, they looked gruesome. "I killed the bear, but I was dying myself. Blood was leaving me, my strength was fading." The old man continued to tap the drum, and with each beat his voice grew deeper, stronger. "I was saying goodbye to life, calling upon the spirits of my ancestors to take me, but instead a man came, a hunter." The old man paused his rhythm for a moment, then resumed it, but at a different pace. "He found me in the snow, almost frozen, bleeding out. He could have just walked past. What was a stranger to him? But he didn't. He picked me up, brought me into his cabin, this very one where we sit now. He nursed me back to health, though I was between life and death for many days. Gregory's eyes widened in surprise. Was that my grandfather's cabin? My grandpa? Timothy? His voice wavered with emotion. The old man nodded, steadily tapping the drum. Yes, Timothy Sterling, a big man, a strong hunter. The old man took a deep breath. He saved my life when I thought my end had come. He cared for me like a brother, even though we didn't understand each other's words at first. So, you knew my grandfather? Gregory leaned forward, forgetting the pain in his knee. But how? He never told anyone? People don't always speak of the good deeds they do. The old man smiled. And your grandfather was a humble man. He didn't like to boast. Do you know what he did after I recovered? Gregory silently shook his head. He escorted me all the way back to my camp. He trekked 5 days through the winter wilderness to ensure I returned safely to my people, and back then there wasn't always friendship between our tribes. The old man stopped tapping the drum, and silence fell in the cabin, broken only by the crackling of wood in the stove. I was the last of the Black Elk clan. If not for your grandfather, my lineage would have ended. But now, the old man smiled dreamily, I have 3 sons, 7 grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. An entire lineage continues. Gregory stared at the old man, trying to grasp the meaning of his words. But why are you here? Why did you save me? The old man set aside the drum and looked seriously at Gregory. That night, when the wolves surrounded you, I had a dream. In it, the spirit of your grandfather came to me. He said that his grandson was in trouble and that he was the last of his line. The old man gazed intently into Gregory's eyes. I had to repay an old debt. Do you understand? Gregory slowly nodded, feeling a chill run down his spine. My grandfather saved you, and now you've saved me. Life for a life, lineage for a lineage, the old man nodded. Your grandfather preserved my lineage, and I preserved his. He picked up the drum again and began to hum a strange melody. Gregory didn't understand the words, but the tune penetrated deep into his soul, evoking a strange sense of familiarity, as if he had heard it long ago, perhaps in a dream. When I was little, Gregory said softly, Grandpa used to take me into the woods. He always taught me to respect the wilderness, said it was alive, and also he always left offerings in certain places, a piece of bread, a pinch of tobacco. I asked him why, and he'd say, it's a tribute to the spirits of the wild. I thought it was just superstition. The old man stopped singing and smiled. Your grandfather was a wise man. He understood that he was not alone in the forest. The old man paused, then added, Soon you'll need to go home. Your mother is worried. But how will I get there? My legs still— It will be better by morning, the old man interrupted him. I'll prepare another brew, and by dawn you'll be able to walk. You have family, Gregory, Timothy's grandson. You must return to them. And you? Gregory asked. Will you come with me? The old man shook his head. No, my place is here, in the wilderness. Our paths diverged the moment I brought you here. He stood and walked over to the stove, where a kettle with some concoction hung. Carefully, he took it down and poured the contents into a wooden bowl. He offered it to Gregory. Drink. This is the last medicine. Gregory dutifully took the bowl and drank the bitter brew. Warmth immediately spread through his body, and his mind felt surprisingly clear. Go to sleep, the old man said, Everything will be fine in the morning." Gregory wanted to ask something else, but his eyelids suddenly became incredibly heavy. He lay down on the bunk and instantly fell into a deep sleep. He awoke to the bright sunlight streaming through the cabin window. Gregory sat up abruptly, looking around. No one was in the cabin. Neither the old man nor his belongings, nor even the drum on the shelf, as if no one had ever been there. Was it a dream, he thought, but immediately dismissed the idea. Everything had been too real. The smell of herbs, the old man's voice, the stories about his grandfather. Gregory carefully stood up and was surprised to find that his knee barely hurt. He took a few steps. His legs supported his weight, though a dull ache was still present. Stepping out onto the cabin porch, he looked around. Untouched snow lay around the cabin, not a single footprint. It was as if the old man could fly above the ground or vanish into thin air. Maybe it really was a dream? The thought flickered again, but an inner voice immediately countered, "Then how did you get into the cabin? And why is your knee healed?" The sun was already high. It was probably around noon. Gregory decided not to delay his return home. He gathered his belongings, checked his shotgun and backpack. On the shelf in the cabin, he found a small birch bark parcel that hadn't been there before. Unwrapping it, he found dried herbs and roots inside, tied with a thin leather thong. A small carved elk figurine made of dark wood was attached to the parcel. A gift from the old man, Gregory realized, and carefully put the parcel and figurine into his pocket. The journey home was surprisingly easy. The weather was clear, the frost wasn't too severe, and his leg bothered him very little. By evening, Gregory was approaching his village, seeing the lights of his home windows in the distance. His mother, seeing him, at first couldn't believe her eyes, then rushed to embrace him, weeping and making the sign of the cross. "Alive, my Gregory, alive! I thought 3 days the blizzard was terrible. I thought you were lost in the woods. I wanted to gather the whole village to search, but there are hardly any men left now, all at the front." "It's all right, Mom." Gregory hugged his mother. "I'm alive and well." "And your leg?" His mother noticed he was limping slightly. "What happened to your leg?" "Nothing much, just twisted it a bit. It's almost gone now." Gregory didn't tell his mother about his adventures. He didn't want to scare her. And would she even believe him? She might think he was delirious from the cold, or that he'd dreamed it all. Only the next day, when Old Man Edward, the oldest resident of the village, stopped by, did Gregory decide to ask him about his grandfather. "Old Man Edward, did you know my grandfather Timothy?" The old man nodded, sipping his tea. "How could I not? He was a good man, bless his soul, an excellent hunter. Is it true that he once saved someone in the wilderness, someone from the local tribes?" Old Man Edward looked at Gregory in surprise. "Who told you that?" He stroked his beard. "It happened, yes, back in, let's see, I think it was 12 or maybe 13. I don't remember exactly." "Tell me," Gregory urged, feeling his heart pound. "What's there to tell? He brought a half-dead man out of the wilderness back then. From the Inuit, I think, or perhaps a Cree. Hard to tell them apart. All covered in blood, barely breathing. Your grandfather nursed him back to health in his cabin, and then even took him back to his camp. People gossiped then. Why get involved, they said. But your grandfather was a special man. No one's trouble was foreign to him." Gregory listened, disbelieving his ears. So it was all true. The old man in the wilderness hadn't been a hallucination from delirium, but real. What happened to that man afterward? Did Grandpa ever meet him again? Old man Edward shook his head. I don't know. Your grandfather didn't like to talk about it. He did a good deed and forgot it, never boasted. But people remember there was something special between them. That Inuit, or whoever he was, gave your grandfather some carved figurine. An amulet or not, I don't know. Your grandfather always carried it with him. An elk figurine, Gregory thought, remembering the old man's gift. Thank you, old man Edward, he said softly. That evening, Gregory took the birch bark parcel and the carved elk figurine from his pocket. He examined them for a long time by the light of the kerosene lamp, then carefully wrapped them and hid them at the bottom of his hunting box. He told no one about his encounter with the old man, not even his mother. But from then on, whenever he went hunting, he always carried the elk figurine with him, and he always left offerings in the wilderness, a piece of bread, a pinch of tobacco, a bright ribbon, just as his grandfather had done. And when, many years later, Venga grew old and died, Gregory took one of her last puppies, and he named him Shaman. The spring of 1952 dawned early and warm. Gregory, now an experienced professional hunter, was returning from his distant trapping grounds. A heavy pack of game was on his back, and his loyal dog, Shaman, strong, powerful, with intelligent, attentive eyes, trotted beside him. As he passed an old cedar tree at the fork of the trails, Gregory stopped and took a piece of bread sprinkled with salt from his pocket. He placed it in the fork of the roots, adding a pinch of tobacco. "What are you doing, Uncle Gregory?" a clear child's voice asked. Gregory turned around. Behind him stood a small boy, about 8 years old, the son of the teacher who had recently moved to the settlement. "I'm making an offering," Gregory answered seriously. "To whom?" the boy wondered. "To the spirits of the wild." "And who are they?" the child persisted, curiously watching the adult's strange actions. Gregory knelt beside the boy. "You see, Timmy, the wilderness, it's alive, and it has its own spirits who watch over it. We, humans, come here for the forest's gifts, berries, mushrooms, game. But you can't just take. You have to respect those who live here and their laws." "And what are the laws of the wilderness?" The boy's eyes lit up with interest. "The main law is, don't take more than you need. If you kill an animal, use everything you can. If you cut down a tree, plant a new one. When you come into the wilderness, respect its silence and peace." The boy thoughtfully looked at the piece of bread and the pinch of tobacco. "And do they really come for this, the spirits of the wild?" Gregory smiled. "Who knows? Maybe they do. But it's not about whether they take the offering or not. It's about respect, about memory, about remembering that we are not alone here." They were silent for a moment. Then the boy asked seriously, "Uncle Gregory, will you teach me how to behave properly in the wilderness?" Gregory looked at the child's open face and unexpectedly replied, "I will. Why not? Once you're older, I'll take you with me, but only if your parents let you." The boy happily nodded and ran off towards the settlement, and Gregory, watching him go, turned to the cedar tree and quietly said, "Do you see, Grandpa Timothy? The chain won't be broken. There will be someone to pass it on to." And he thought he saw the cedar branches sway slightly in response, though there was no wind.